have a good friend of mine. He's become a great friend of mine, I should say. We talk all the time now. But Dr. Loeb is our chief clinical scientist. I think I have that right. He's also an adult neurologist out of UIC, University of Illinois of Chicago. And he is also, I just say in charge, but he talks to us about the brain vascular um, malformation consortium. I think I forgot a letter in there, the BVMC. And he's going to just take about 30 minutes just to explain to you what it is and why it's so important to us. And if you're not engaged already as a member of the BVMC, it's critical that we get you engaged because we have a need for about 100 more patients. And with that, Dr. Lowe, please go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Julia. Great to be here as usual. And thanks everybody for joining in. I'm sorry I missed the beginning presentations. As Julia mentioned, I had the neurology department at the University of Illinois. And for probably like almost 7 years now, I've been working with the foundation and more recently as the chief clinical strategist. So try to figure out how we can learn more. When problems with rare diseases is that they're rare. And so that's why, the Zoom is so important, that you can get people from all over the country, all over the world together and share information. And as we're doing this, we're realizing how little we know about the natural history of the disease. So what can you expect as you or your child grows older? What are the next things that you're going to run in? What are the problems? Can we anticipate them? What are the potential solutions? What treatments might actually out there work, and what treatments do we need to develop? So this is why it's so important that we all work together and participate, because it's about all of our futures. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sturge-Weber syndrome. As you know, it affects the skin, the eye, and the brain. And here's examples here. And doesn't stop after you're born. We're learning more and more, particularly in the brain and also the skin and the eye. The disease continues and advances. And sometimes, I notice that patients come to me as adults with symptoms for the first time. So what can I expect as I grow older? Are there any new treatments? These are important questions that we desperately need the answers to. And most importantly, if there were a way to prevent this from progressing, to prevent bad things from happening downstream, can we do that? And can we learn from each other to do that? So many of you know that the Sturge-Weber syndrome is caused by a gene mutation during embryonic development that affects the brain, the skin, and the eye. These results in diseases, manifestations varying from cognitive dysfunctions, behavioral abnormalities, seizures, headaches, migraines, stroke-like episodes. And then as the development of the disease continues, these symptoms can change and progress over time. We have a number of medications that are used. Unfortunately, none of these have actually been proven in really high-level clinical studies. And this is another reason why we need to collect not only information on what people have tried and what's works, but to assemble folks so that if we do have a new treatment, we can contact you, we can get people enrolled in clinical studies and actually have real answers to these questions in the future. And when I first met families and got involved with the foundation and say, well, what's important to you? And really it's about quality of life. We as physicians and scientists, we focus on all of the biochemistry and molecular biology and MRIs and things like that. But ultimately what it comes down to is if we can understand, if we can prevent, if we anticipate what's going to happen and teach people about it, and improve your access to care is another thing we're really trying to work on. Can we improve the quality of life for not only the patients, but the families as well? So I'd like to start out with some of the symptoms, because symptoms that Sturge-Weber patients have can be very, very different than other patients who have epilepsy or other disorders. So Maureen says, my seizures, I get this tingling feeling in my right foot. It slowly, over 10 minutes, which is a long time, rises up my leg as a wave of tingling, and afterwards, my leg feels numb and weak. This feeling spreads to my arm, then my hand, sometimes to my face. Afterwards, I get so weak on my right side, but this can get better over 30 minutes ago. I can sometimes get a throbbing, pounding headache that can last all day. So this is a common set of symptoms that we're learning about because of our studies that is collecting actual detailed data and histories for people with Sturge-Weber syndrome. So the problem we had is we desperately need these longitudinal studies to understand and come up with better ways to see how the disease progresses, both in children and adults, and identify where the unmet needs are, where the treatments might be working, what things we should test in clinical trials, and what kind of new treatments we could try in clinical trials. And then at the same time, I have a list of people who might be, we could contact. Well, I have that symptom. Those are the people you want to enroll in the clinical trial. If you're looking at seizures, if you're looking at headaches, if you're looking at skin treatments, if you're looking at eye treatment. By having a database of folks who have this, we can actually very quickly be more nimble in doing these clinical trials. And also, the goal is to attract pharmaceutical industry to get involved so that they work on our disease and not somebody else's. So the BVMC stands for Brain Vascular Malformation Consortium, which I do direct project 2 of this. There's 2 other diseases involved as well that have similar problems in the brain. But for Sturge-Weber, the goal is to identify what we call biomarkers or evidence from imaging how the disease is progressing and understand or develop new therapeutic strategies. We started late, and our goal is we only have 101 patients. We've got a year to go, and we're after 250. If we get to 200, we'll be doing really well. So the overarching goals is to do what's called retrospective studies, to actually pull real clinical information from medical records. You know, a lot of times you get asked to sort of, as family members or patients, to try to remember what you have and what it showed and what you took when. But we actually want to get the actual clinical records and MRIs from patients, knowing what treatments they're on at the time they had symptoms is really important, because they can say, well, I took aspirin, but when I was taking it, I didn't have symptoms. When I took it, I had symptoms. So you don't know until you really get more detail in the database. And then use this to understand how changes that are going on, particularly in the brain, when we see it on MRI tests, how does that relate to those symptoms, and what drugs might actually be working. And then finally develop models and identify people who could be enrolled in clinical trials to get the final answers to these questions. As part of doing this, we're using the latest technology to actually improve. If anybody has actually looked at their medical records and stacks of paper and digital stuff that's very inaccurate sometimes, we want an accurate sample. So we actually hire people at 8 sites across the country to enter the data and build a dashboard that we're actually hoping, when we finish this, to give all of you access to. So you can see this is a patient with Sturge-Weber, and this is how old they are, and this is when they had more seizures, and this is when they had more headaches or cognitive problems. This is when they started this medication or that medication, and these are all the MRI studies that they've had and when changes in the brain occurred, so we can actually understand the relationship between what's happening in the brain to the clinical symptoms to the treatments together. And this is something, as a physician, we rarely do in medical practice, but if we could make a huge difference. So why not start with Sturge-Weber and do this? So we've built this dashboard. A part of the study is also if during the study period you get, or your family member gets terrible symptoms, we go back and look again to try to understand what made things worse. And I'll tell you a little bit about. We do 3 things. We collect clinical information from your medical records. We actually, and that's all digital most of the time. We get copies of the MRI tests, and then we, and some who are willing to, we can do a blood sample before you get sick. And if you do get sick, we collect it again to see what's different. So as I mentioned, we build a dashboard. Unfortunately, it's an old presentation, so ignore that last email address. It's a new person to contact, and we'll give you that information at the end. So this is just it shows the huge amount of different types of information that we collect over time on this database. Everything from demographics, family history, medical history, to everything neurological, from each of your visits, how many seizures you had, headaches, did you have stroke-like episodes, did you have MRI, CT, or EEG studies, and what were the results? All of the dermatology, all of the ophthalmology visits. Did you get a blood draw? When was it collected? And so forth. So it's very comprehensive. It's a fair amount of work to do. We do all the work. We work with you to get the information. Another important thing people ask is, how do I protect my privacy? Are you going to take this information and do something with it, or let people know I have this disease or something? And we're very, very careful about this. And everything is what we call de-identified and put into a standardized way that you can't track back who someone is. But again, in the future, we'd like to actually get this information back to you, but we would reconsent you for that in the future. So some of the things that we've done from this study is build cool ways of following what happens in the brain over time. This is a patient who doesn't have Sturge-Weber, but has bleeding in the brain, and it just shows the ability to take a number of scans in time, make movies of how things change over time, and build that into the system. So that's one thing we can do. And again, we relate all of these changes to what's happening clinically. So we're very eager to continue our recruitment effort. We use these family meetings to spread the word, answer questions for people. We're working on another project, so if you don't live close to one of our 8 sites scattered around the country, we can still enroll you at a distance and maybe even collect a blood sample through a network that we're calling SWORD coming up. We're also working to raise money. So the grant is funded by the government, by the NIH. We've got 1 more year of funding. What are we going to do with this valuable database afterwards? If we could get 200 or 250 patients, that would be great. But if we got 1,000, think how valuable that information would be. So we're working on raising dollars and see if either other sources of grants or from donors to see if they can help us continue this to bring the database into the foundation and continue it forward. Because as you and or your family member grows up with Sturge-Weber, I think it's so important to have this information and follow this ahead. Another thing we're working is trying to get industry involved by having access to patients to do drug studies. To this dashboard is a new kind of medical record, and the software we're developing actually could even have value in helping other chronic and rare disease too, finding out what medications currently might be working and which not. We're hoping to start a clinical study to attack the calcifications in the brain and think that they may be responsible using an old drug that's basically a water softener and a bone drug. And we've had some preliminary data in patients suggesting that this could make a huge difference. And again, all of this takes, raising funds, raising awareness to do these studies. And then again, by having the expanding the network of folks who sign up for this and join in, again, protecting their end-of-day, we can still contact you and see who would be the best for a specific clinical trials or something we can see on the MRI that we can treat in the studies. Those will all help new treatments. So that's kind of the nutshell of what we're doing. As I say, we've gotten over 100 patients so far, and we're already learning a huge amount about the natural history, about what to expect, about what treatments might be working and what's not working, and what happens in the brain and the skin and the face over time. So I'm going to stop here and see if you have any questions. Stop sharing my screen. Here we go. Okay.
Dr. Loeb, they did ask if they were part of the Detroit study with Dr. CJ, would they then be able to be part of this study?
Absolutely. So if you want to work, that's one of our coordinating sites. So if you already are working and having imaging done with Dr. Juhas, he's part of the study just as much. He does analysis, a lot of the imaging that we're doing here. And that would be a very nice segue, a nice easy way to just transfer and join. It's a different consent form you'd have to sign to be part of the study. And you can ask all kinds of questions. And, as I say, I keep saying this, we protect your identity, but, we can actually get back to you if we actually have a new treatment and say, hey, there's something we'd like to try. Would you like to be in a clinical trial? Other questions?
Along with that, if you were interested in the Detroit study too, let me know that too. That's another study that we work with. Email me. I just put my email, I think, in the chat. So don't hesitate to email me and let me know. My family, Marissa, has done both and is in both. And it really is not excruciating at all. It is not hard. It's very easy to do this. But the information that we're gaining is just remarkable. So, and I know we talk about it all the time at the foundation too. So
Yeah,
please,
people talk about
this is a great
artificial.
chance. I mean,
Yeah, people talk about artificial intelligence is going to be able to solve all of our problems, and the challenge is what they also say: garbage in, garbage out. So unless we get good information from clinical records, from MRIs, and we turn everything into numbers and quantify things. It's really I got some amazing folks working with me, building software, doing quantitative image analysis that's putting us in the forefront. And as I say, why shouldn't it be Sturge-Weber, where we pioneer how to care for rare disorders and solve some of these problems. Everybody's so quiet this morning.
they had a lot for Dr. Gupta a few moments ago. But they're a little quiet today. Yeah.
But please, Julia will be in touch with you and provide you the information of those on the call today, how to get involved. If you're not at one of our 8 sites across the country, we can assign you to the nearest site and collect your information. If you don't want to have a blood drawn, you don't have to do that. But we just want as many people as possible to get involved and be part of this, so that we can use that information, not only to help you, but to help others, the next generation, or those who are getting older. We're learning so much about what happens, and that's going to be so critical to help folks who have young children with this disease right now.
Awesome.
I see a question in the chat from Kanan. Hello, how are you today? I've met you before. You can unmute yourself. Do you have your mute button? You have to click your mute button. Your mute button, if you have to click the button in the lower left corner you're muted, so I can't hear you talk.
Right. Sorry about that.
There we go.
Hi, doctor. And and this project is you do run just only a specific center, or is a multi-center?
It's multi-center. We have 8 sites in the United States, and we have taken on some patients from Europe, from other places as well.
I see. I also look ahead for my son to be enrolled in that project.
You're in Turkey, right?
Exactly.
Where in Turkey are you?
It's just an hour away, Istanbul.
Istanbul. Yeah, I'm going to be there this fall for a day. I'm stopping
Really?
over.
No, before that, we plan to be there in Philadelphia in
Okay.
July.
Oh, good. So I'll see you in Philadelphia. Great.
You're
Yeah.
there. Okay, fine. Thank you, doctor.
Oh, glad to meet you in person.
Yes.
You've been a regular at these meetings, so I look
Uh,
forward to meeting you.
exactly. It's a really good opportunity for us, doctor.
The other thing I do, as being an adult neurologist, epileptologist, there's, as I say, a lot of centers that focus on kids and very few, and I'm happy to help out with adults who have Sturge-Weber, who say, what's going on? Is this something related to Sturge-Weber? Or is this just something that you normally get when you turn 65 or 45? It becomes a challenge. So I worked with a lot of folks across the country and tried to help those adults. And again, the more experiences we get and the more information we get, the more help we can provide.
Dr. Loeb, it's funny you mentioned that, because there was a question today about a 14-year-old, 15-year-old who had some onset of migraine headaches. What is the recommended treatment for migraines, and if they're ocular migraines?
Well, I mean, again, a lot of it's in the details of what the migraine is. Is there symptoms that precede the migraine? Some people before a migraine will get these little flashing, sparkly lights, followed by kind of a blurring of the vision, and then the headache comes afterwards. And if I were to, be happy to talk to this family. But if this 14 or 15-year-old happened to have Sturge-Weber with calcifications in the occipital lobe, I've seen that quite a bit, that's causing it. So those are the kind of patients that this new treatment that we might want to chelate the calcium of the brain could really help. But that treatment's not available yet. We're trying to raise funds for a clinical trial for that. Another thing is that it could be more related to using seizure drugs rather than migraine drugs, because it may start out as a small seizure and then turn into a headache. What's interesting is when we looked at the 100 patients that we've accumulated now, we've learned that the seizures and cognitive problems are very common at an early age, but the headaches don't seem to come on till later, particularly like teenagers coming on. So it's very interesting. And the other thing that we don't talk enough about is some of the behavioral, the cognitive things. Julia, we were talking about this just last week, that out of the blue, somebody will have just a breakdown and, get confused and agitated, and then they go seen by psychiatrists who don't know what to do. It's really, that can be one of the most traumatic experiences that parents and loved ones have to go through, these emotional outbursts. And I'm convinced that it's not just because they happen to be a teenager. I think it's because they actually have something going on in their brain that we could probably help with the right treatment.
Agreed. Dr. Loeb, I will get you in touch with Kate, because that's who had that question.
Okay, sure.
Next week, if you don't mind. And they're really quiet today.
All right.
A
So it's
bad
Dave
thing. I
up
know they're
next.
waiting
Hi,
for
Dave.
some
How are
surgery
you? Nice to
questions.
see you.
Hey, boss. Good to
Actually,
see you.
Beth Rollet has joined us today. There's Dave. He's going to talk at the end about some surgery questions that they have.
Oh, fantastic.
But one quick got in here before Beth Rollet jumps in here. But what treatment for behavioral issues? So this could take us all day.
Well, you're asking me?
Well, that's the question that just came up, and I can
Yeah,
I
no,
can send that to.
I think it's, I think we're learning more and more the relationship between, signals in the brain and behavior. It's not just random. Now, if there's a behavioral issue, that something happens and, something traumatic or emotionally, and then you get a behavioral response, that could be a normal teenager or child having a response to something. But if it kind of happens out of the blue and you get this profound behavioral change and agitation or aggression that comes out of nowhere, I'm actually starting to put these patients in our epilepsy monitoring unit and seeing that they may be having subclinical seizures. So seizures can be convulsions or shaking, but they can also cause changes in abrupt behavior like that. And by using combinations of these types of medications, I've actually been able to be successful and reducing some of those behaviors. So particularly if, they come out of nowhere and they come off and on. And that's more, and it's not for a reason, like, oh my gosh, something happened, somebody got hurt, somebody made fun of them. That's one reason. But if nothing precipitated that outburst, it may be that all of those changes that we're seeing in the brain are contributing to behavior. And to me, it wouldn't be surprising. I would think it'd be likely that if you have these changes going on in your brain, you're going to have more emotional lability that may be unrelated to what's going on around you, but is intrinsic to what's happening in your brain. But these are the kind of things that we want to capture in the study, so we can start learning about them, because they can be some of the most traumatic things, even worse than seizures and stroke-like episodes.
Great. Yeah, it definitely changes everything in the family unit too. So agreed. Dr. Loeb, thank you as always. I know you just
All
got
right.
off a
Hope
plane
we'll
and
see you guys
came
in
to visit us.
Philadelphia. And please sign up for the study. They've got 1 year to go, and tell everybody you know. Let's all join in and help each other. Bye-bye.
Thank you.